You know, when we think of the 1950s, it's easy to picture poodle skirts and sock hops. But for Hollywood, oh, it was an all out, high stakes fight for its very survival. This was a decade that forced a cinematic revolution, and it ended up changing movies forever. And why all the panic? Well, it came down to this simple, boxy piece of furniture that started popping up in living rooms all over America: the television. Suddenly, there was a new competitor in town, and it was threatening to make the entire movie-going experience obsolete. So you had this clear showdown. On one side, you've got the magic of the movies: huge screens, vibrant color, a real spectacle you had to leave your house for. And on the other, the undeniable and, let's face it, unbeatable convenience of television. Free entertainment right there in your living room. Hollywood knew it couldn't win on convenience, so it had to go all in on the experience. And that led to Hollywood's grand gamble, a full-on counterattack. The studios decided, okay, we're not going to make our movies cheaper or faster. We're going to create experiences so huge, so powerful, that you'll have no choice but to get off that couch and come back to the theater. Tactic number one was just pure incredible spectacle. The whole goal was to make movies so big, so colorful, and so bursting with life that they'd look completely out of place on a dinky little TV screen. We're talking massive sets, casts of thousands, and these unforgettable musical numbers that just filled the entire room with energy. So, what does that actually look like? Well, take a look at this number. In 1951, for An American in Paris, the studio spent $500,000. That was an insane amount of money back then. We're talking millions today, on a single 17-minute ballet sequence at the end of the film. This wasn't just a scene, it was a statement. It was them throwing down the gauntlet. And the dedication behind the spectacle was just as wild. This number, that was Gene Kelly's fever when he filmed the legendary rain-soaked title sequence for Singin' in the Rain. The man was literally sick as a dog, but he went out there and delivered one of the most joyous moments in film history. Talk about commitment. So if television was this little box, cinema was going to be the great wide open. And no genre showed this off better than the Western. Directors started using these vast, sweeping American landscapes not just as a pretty background, but as a character in the story, a canvas that television's small screen just couldn't touch. And you can see how this led to two really different approaches. In The Searchers, John Ford used the epic, lonely scale of Monument Valley to show you what was going on inside John Wayne's head. But with High Noon, the gamble was totally different. They used a real-time ticking clock narrative that created this unbearable tension, gluing you to your seat. Both used the big screen to create an unmissable event, just in completely different ways. But it wasn't just about making things bigger. Filmmakers started inventing a whole new visual language. They were crafting techniques specifically to get inside your head, to manipulate your emotions and create experiences that were uniquely cinematic. And the guy leading the charge? Alfred Hitchcock. Okay, so for his masterpiece Vertigo, Hitchcock had a problem. How do you show an audience what a crippling fear of heights feels like? Well, his crew literally invented a new shot to do it: the dolly zoom. It's this camera trick that physically distorts perspective and gives you this gut-wrenching, dizzying feeling. It wasn't just a gimmick, it was a way of putting the audience right inside the character's panicked mind. And that level of control was just incredible. For his 1954 thriller, Rear Window, Hitchcock shot the entire movie on, get this, one single set: a massive, custom-built apartment courtyard. Every window, every neighbor, every single thing you see was meticulously constructed and controlled from one single point of view. But, the fight wasn't all about visual scale and camera tricks. Hollywood also went in the complete opposite direction. They turned the camera inward, exploring raw human emotion and psychological depth with an intensity that safe, family-friendly TV shows just couldn't touch. This was a new kind of spectacle, the spectacle of the human condition. Let's look at two fantastic examples. In 12 Angry Men, a movie that takes place almost entirely in one jury room, the director did something brilliant. He gradually used longer and longer camera lenses as the film went on. It's a subtle change, but it makes the walls feel like they're physically closing in, just cranking up that claustrophobic tension. And then you have Marlon Brando in On the Waterfront. He brought this new method acting style to the mainstream, this immersive performance that had a raw, emotional realism that audiences had just never, ever seen before. Now, while the big studios were spending millions on these epic productions, something else was happening. A whole scrappy, independent film scene started bubbling up. These filmmakers, they didn't have the big budgets, so they turned their limitations into strengths, creating this gritty, authentic style that would go on to influence cinema for decades.
Just look at some of these innovations. Little Fugitive used a custom-built, strapped-on camera to capture the real streets of Coney Island, which directly inspired the French New Wave. The Hitchhiker, a super tense film noir, broke huge barriers by being directed by a woman, Ida Lupino. And Shadows just leaned into its raw aesthetic, shooting on 16mm film with largely improvised dialogue to capture the Beat generation like nothing else.
And of course, a decade of so much change was defined by the people who were leading the charge. A new generation of stars and master directors came onto the scene, and every single one of them left their own unique mark on how stories were told. I mean, you have these absolute titans shaping the era. There's Marlon Brando, completely revolutionizing what acting could be with his raw intensity. You've got James Stewart, who used to be America's everyman, suddenly diving into these dark, complex roles for Hitchcock. And behind the camera, you have Hitchcock himself, the master of suspense, and the unbelievably versatile Billy Wilder, who could give you a cynical noir one year and a brilliant comedy the next. So all of this innovation, all of it born from a sense of panic and a desperate fight to survive, it created a legacy in cinema that we still feel today. And honestly, it's a pivotal decade that's so worth exploring for yourself. So here's a little viewing mission for you. Start with the pure joy and spectacle of Singin' in the Rain. Then totally switch gears and watch the tense, masterful drama of 12 Angry Men to feel the power of great writing and acting. And finally, go seek out an independent gem like Little Fugitive to see the raw, street-level filmmaking that would inspire a whole new generation. You know, the 1950s proved that when you're faced with a new technology, the answer isn't to just copy it. It's to offer something completely different. Something bigger, deeper, and more innovative. And as we're navigating our own endless ocean of streaming services and content feeds, it makes you wonder, what lessons from Hollywood's first great battle for our attention are just sitting there, waiting to be rediscovered?